Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Tay, back with the Division 3 Diaries podcast here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Spotify. Today I'm joined by Coach Dipen Patel of UWRF, UW River Falls. Uh, great guy, and we're excited to start this. So why don't you introduce yourself, Coach, and kind of explain how you got into coaching and how you got to UWRF?
Yeah, so I started coaching out. I'm from California originally. I coached at a club called Pacific Rim Volleyball Academy, with my mentor Roger Worsley. Had a lot of success there. We ended up winning 17 Open and 18 Open 2 years in a row. And I found my passion for wanting to be a college volleyball coach. Thought I was going to be an architect. That was definitely not the case. Um, I realized very quickly that coaching was where I wanted to go. So ended up coaching 2 years at San Francisco State, went to Eastern Illinois at a Division I school for a couple of years, and then found my way to the conference that we're in right now for Division 3, which is the WIAC. Was at Wisconsin Lacrosse for a couple of years, or for 3 years, and then ended up taking the big boy job here at as the head coach here at River Falls.
I mean, so obviously you have a lot of coaching experience, and it's been quite an amazing journey already. But since taking over at River Falls, like kind of how has that journey shaped, I guess, the way you see things now? Not even from a coaching perspective, just like in a general aspect of like being blessed for opportunity and not taking things for granted. How have like obviously because I feel like going from a Division 1 and getting that experience going to Division 3, like how has that affected you in a positive way? Something that like you look at back at and can like reminisce and be like, this is why I do this because of this.
Yeah, I think it was really cool to go from Division 2 to Division 1 to Division 3. One, the experience of like just learning about the same things occur no matter what division, right? So like successful programs have very successful, attributes, whether it's time commitment, whether it's, the culture of the program, the standards that are set, the buy-in that you get. And so I thought that was a really cool lesson to learn at all three divisions. And then I think it was really interesting was like the biggest misconception is like the competitiveness. And so, I like some of the teams that we've played at Division 1, I like there are teams in our conference that could beat those teams, most likely. And like I think that was something that even I was naive to until I actually stepped foot in the Division 3 world. Because, when you go from coaching club and your goal on a consistent basis, like the club for us in California was to qualify for Open and to be a gold bracket team in the Open division, which is basically the equivalent of some of the top athletes in the country. Well, even at D3 recruiting, we're recruiting kids that are qualifying for nationals and open level teams. And so like I think that that was the biggest learning curve of like, hey, yeah, just because you coach a different division or, if you're not being recruited by Division 1 or Division 2 doesn't mean you're not going to get the highest level of play as long as you find the right fit that's for you. And that's something that I appreciate as a coach because I'm a competitor through and through. Like I know winning isn't the end all be all, but there's a phrase that we use in our program that winning matters, and it means that you're winning the everyday battles, right? Like winning the practice, winning the academic side, winning the relationship side, winning the recruiting side. So that's kind of what we talk about in our program here.
And I mean, I definitely get that. I mean, I say it all the time. Julianata versus like I'd say like Julianata, UWW, Hope versus like 75% of like Division 2, low Division 1. I'm taking the D3 team,
Yeah.
especially like that, especially Julianata. Like put them in a tournament with Division 1 teams. I think they could do fairly well. And then the recruiting thing too is like I definitely get that. We had them when I was with Sage. I recruited this girl from Arizona Sky, and her team went to nationals. They won, and we had like we also had that very like mindset like, oh, she'll probably go like D2 D1, like there's no way we're getting her. And then she committed, and it was like a big celebration because it's like okay, like, and for these players too, it's like committing to schools like that, like Sage, for example, who's not like on the map yet. They're noticeable, people know about them, but they're not on the map. It can really be a program changer coming in. But kind of speaking like kind of on that of like program changers and program, I guess, monuments in terms of players. Is there any players that like that you've coached at UWRF that have really stood out to you? Maybe not on the court, but like as like a leader, someone that the team rallies behind. Like if they speak in a huddle, everyone's listening, dialed in, and actually takes the feedback they give and applies it. Just a player that like really helped you when you started coaching at UWRF, kind of establish yourself and show that these players have trust in
Yeah, I had a really good handful of players that I inherited when I came into this program. I think we had players like, Katie Kerper, who was just hungry. She was my first year in 2022. And just one of the hardest working kids in the weight room, took care of herself outside of the class or outside of the gym. 2023, I'd probably throw a really, really cool group of women, in my opinion, because like they were like glue kids, right? Like we talk about like every program needs like skill players, talent players. We need some dogs, and then we need some glue kids, right? Like, that just keep it all together. And so in 2023, I think we got, Lauren Shields, Camry Meredith, Kate Seymour, Hannah Polk was probably somebody I would put in that group. Where, they didn't speak all the time, but if they did speak up, everyone listened because they were more behind the scenes of how they kept the team together. Carrie Meredith was probably the most boisterous one, and I think like if I could copy and paste how Camry Meredith carried herself throughout the program, like the toughness, the relationship first, the standard, the she's not afraid to stop a practice, bring everyone in and be like the standard, like we're just not talking enough, or the volume's not there, or the and so I do enjoy that piece of having her in our program. Even last year, like there was a huge turnover, and we're basically starting over. We had 17 women on the roster, you know, 14 out of the 17 were freshmen and sophomore. Like I think we had some good kids that came in, and they were able to do a little bit of that leadership role. You had Abby, who wasn't like a complete captain for us, but when she spoke in the locker room, everyone knew that she cared, and I think that was a big one. Ashley, was more of the person that she wasn't afraid to, tell people that they needed to step it up, but then she wasn't also afraid, to take someone aside and put her arm around their shoulder. And then on the freshmen, like we're a young team, again for probably another half year until we bring in that 26 class. And you have players like Cora right now who works her butt off. Like even it's just interesting to listen to her talk and how she's like, yeah, I had a call with so and so this week and I just really wanted to connect with them. And I'm like, well, that's impressive. Like you're this level of attention to detail, like in a time that it's not required. Like you should be enjoying summer a little bit, but you still care about this. And so I think those are the things that like really, when you talk about key people who stand out, those are the few.
I mean, I feel like when I was at Sage, we had a lot of like we didn't have one player that was collectively like that person, but we had like everyone, we had a bunch of players and each of them had like a different role. That it wasn't like an assigned role, but like for example, Ash Gerkman was one of our outside DSs and she did a lot for us in terms of recruitment. She coaches at Legion and is like
Mhm.
an insanely talented coach. He's working with GMS right now. And she did a lot for us in terms of like getting recruits to the program, getting them visits and helping us with that. And then when the visits actually happened, we had two girls, Maddie and Emma, who really took over and were like the hosts. Like they were our hosts. Like anytime a recruit came, give them to Emma and Maddie. Because I mean they just knew how to have a good time. And we draw a lot of dual athletes to Sage. So Emma being a dual athlete as well served that purpose as well, showing like how because she's also PT. And
Mhm.
so balancing all three of those things, it really took off. And then we have Macy, who's a little 5'3" Macy Salvione playing as our outside one, bringing Division 1 experience into the gym and bringing like a sense of knowledge that you just don't see that often and kind of being that leader. And then of course we have the final one I'd say is a girl named Anaya Kelly, who's probably going to be their number one attacker next year. um just she was never like someone who was like I'm gonna speak out and like say my piece. She kind of just says like, hey, listen, we need to step it up, and when she says it everyone kind of just rallies behind it. So I think that I definitely like those players that like they might not speak a lot, but when they do speak everyone's like, oh shoot, this person's speaking, we gotta settle in.
Yeah.
um but you talk a lot about kind of what I'm hearing is kind of like a culture at UWRF, like of a growing culture, open-mindedness, willingness to grow. But in terms of culture in general, like how has that culture shifted since you've joined this, like joined as the head coach, to now in a positive way? And how has that like impacted what you look for in a recruit? Because I feel like a team culture is very impactful on how a person recruits. Like if the team is very like we go out all the time and do stuff, you want to recruit who's like open and like very friendly and not as like introverted, something like that, just along those lines.
Yeah, I think recruiting is an imperfect science, right? Like there are years that, certain times a coach might get it wrong and you think a kid's a great fit and turns out it isn't. And maybe at the time when you were recruiting them, they were a right fit, but the culture had evolved to a point where that athlete was no longer the best fit for the program or for themselves. Um, I think for us, like it's evolved a lot. Like we have four pillars and it's, love and trust is number one, communication, consistency, and accountability. And the biggest thing that we talk about is culture is like we don't talk about it very much. It should be demonstrated, right? Like, and the example that I like to give a lot of the times is like, like when I go to Midwestern nice, right? Like, or Minnesota nice, right? Like, or you go to Southern hospitality and like you walk into, a diner and it's just without even being told, right? It's always yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, ma'am, things like that, where that's the culture, right? Like nobody has to talk about it. It's just what we are. It's who we are. It's how we demonstrate ourselves. And so that's always the goal for us is like, when kids come in and they experience camp or they do a visit or they talk to a coach or they see us working somewhere, like do they see those four things is the big one. The other one is how does it shift us in recruiting? Well, I think and this is again learning from like other divisions and like previous experience, right? Like I Karch Karai said this phrase during a podcast or something way back in the day, right before they won their gold medal the first time. And it's like we got to out team the other team. And it was one of the coolest things that I thought about was like, at some point, like talent is going to get you through the door, right? Like every coach is trying to recruit talent, and talent just wins games. In order to win championships, you have to have better love and trust and better chemistry, and you have to be tighter than the other team in the championship game. And when I reflect back onto like our 17 Open national championship win in 2014, that was Pacific Rim versus Balboa Bay. And like it was two equally talented teams, right? And then in 2015, it's, Pacific Rim versus HBC, which that's got the HBC roster has men's national team players like Josh Tuaninga and TJ DeFalco, and they're playing up against Joe Worsley and Gage Worsley and Patrick Gassman. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I thought in a nutshell, a little bit, HBC was a little more talented than us. But at the end of the day, the chemistry, right? Like that love and trust between our team and the championship game, you could see which team was way tighter. And that was the team that prevailed. And so that's what kind of taught me a little bit more about like the recruiting side, where it's like, we try to recruit very like-minded kids, right? So whatever the makeup of the personality of the group is right now, um, we're not going to try to bring in somebody that's a complete polar opposite. We want diversity of thought and culture, but we don't want polarizing, viewpoints in the locker room. We bring in like-minded kids, so it's easy for them to gel together, and it's easier to cultivate that chemistry and that love and trust. And then we focus on the training and the skill development, and that's what develops into the team performance outcomes.
And I feel like one thing that's like I've noticed, especially when recruiting and like even the men's side, like I have a lot of men's players as my friends, like who I'm friends with, and just like seeing development between like a person who comes in with all the talent in the world and a person who might not have the talent there, but is like they mesh with the team, they grow. It's an exponential difference. And two examples I'll use are my good friends Tyler Ryan, who's a player at Purchase, and then Jack McWilliam, who played at Sage. They both like going into college were they had like a volleyball experience, but it wasn't like competitive volleyball experience. And now, I mean, Ty was an all honorable mention all conference last year, and Jack was is probably one of the best 5 tool players I've ever met, and he started playing in college. So I
Mhm.
just think that potential comes from the mindset of the player rather than the actual skill. Because I've also seen like many Division 1 players who they're really highly touted recruits. Everyone wants them. They get to college and they kind of their game kind of just stays flat. You don't really see a lot of improvement. You see flashes of like intelligence, and you can tell that like, hey, they're adding, maybe shots to their arsenal. But I think from what I see, a lot of them just kind of stay on that median line. And
Yep.
then they'll come down to like Division 3 from Division 1, and you'll see them kind of excel. So I mean, I definitely agree with that. And I think definitely finding commits that mesh well with your program are important, because I also see so many coaches that recruit these players for skill because they're really trying to rebuild their program, but they're not trying to rebuild their program.
That's a
Um,
bigger headache, to be honest. Like it's way harder to build around like you have really highly skilled players, but the personalities, and especially in our sport, right? Like personalities is a big deal in the women's game, where I feel like that's one of the biggest contributing factors. When you have players that they don't have to put a lot of effort to, fall in love with one another and be there for one another. Like that just makes your job way easier as a coach, in my opinion.
I think also having that blend of mindset and culture makes it easier to get recruits.
Yeah.
Like at Sage, for example, like we had all of our players basically in contact with all these girls that have committed long before. Now, a lot of them are from the area, a lot of them are LVC
Mhm.
prodigies, but like for example, Emma Curry, who's the libero from AZ Sky, Kendall Perkins, who's from Florida, she plays with Kiwi. They both like were basically part of the group before they were part of the like
Yep.
Kendall. I remember her visit specifically. She came up and like it was basically like they had known each other for
Yep.
years and years and years. So I definitely get that. And I think what a lot of schools are starting to realize now is, hey, we don't have to go after the number 1 recruit on this list of recruits. If we go for the number 5 recruit, just because she meshes so well with our team,
Yep.
it's like, and a lot of teams need these glue people now. I feel like a lot of the glue players on teams were COVID players. They just finished out, and
Yep.
now they're looking for that next person, whether it's an upperclassman or whether it's a recruit coming in who can just kind of command more. I feel like you have a better chance. And I think what people also don't realize is just there's so many schools out there at all levels, all divisions, all even leagues, if you want to call them that.
Yep.
And just you just have to find the one that you mesh with the best. Um, so we kind of touched base on that, but kind of going off of that and with recruitment, um, I guess everyone has like a few pillars that they're looking for in recruitment specifically when they're looking at a recruit in terms of, let's say in terms of skill. For example, when we were looking at with liberos, we wanted a libero that was very solid in serve receive and could use improvement on defense, even if it's already there. But like just a libero that's solid in serve receive. But looking at it from an on-court perspective, what are like a couple of key points you look for when recruiting?
Um, I would say like I think your communication skills is a big one, right? Like I can't tell you how many times we get, I mean, I know I've talked to other Wyatt coaches too about this, where it's like just the sheer amount of emails we get. Because like Division 3 volleyball here in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa area, it like
Off the
it's
top.
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's really good volleyball in California and on the east, like Juniata and some of those East Coast schools, but like the how compacted
Yeah.
D3 volleyball in just this region is.
Well, I think it's also this, like, I feel like, because if you look at like the landmark where Juliana plays, it's a
Yep.
significant difference in skill between the teams. You
Yeah.
look at like the Empire Eight's another one, very,
Yeah.
very significant
Like the
difference.
top to the bottom. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
And whereas like the Midwest, like even if you want to go like UAA, the WIAC, like
Yeah.
it's very everyone is in competitive for
Yeah.
that conference title every year. And I keep saying this, but in my opinion, the WIAC is the Big Ten of Division
Yeah,
three
it
volleyball.
is. I agree with that. No, so I think like the one that I look at is like communication. Like if you're interested in the school, like do you know your stuff? Right. And then I think that's gonna gravitate a coach towards you a little bit more over like a kid that's like freakishly talented, right? Like that coach is gonna give you attention if you know your stuff. Um, so like doing the research, doing the legwork, utilizing Chat GPT now to get the rundown on like instead of going back and like going through all the archive sessions, like just look up on ChatGPT, what's this program's history over the last 5 years and let ChatGPT do the work for you, right? Like, and I think that's a really cool thing of like one, the communication is a big one, right? And even, like coaches don't have your schedule, right? Like if you're a recruit, like we don't know your schedule. We don't know how busy you are, when you're busy, what you got going on. And so if we're reaching out to you, texting you, emailing you, DMing you, like just a quick like, hey, thanks for the interest. I'll get back to you in a week and then and send some sort of follow-up, right? Like I think that communication is like an elite skill. And it just helps keep your options open. From an on the court standpoint, like when we go and watch kids, like I tell kids this all the time, like I'll watch a highlight film or I'll watch like a little bit of like intangibles to like get me like, ooh, I want to go see that kid live. But when I'm there, it's not just performance or what kind of teammate you are. I actually look at the two players that stand immediately next to you. So if like you're an outside hitter, I look at the middle blocker and I look at the libero, playing left back. And I'm looking at their body language when you're on the court. And that's what I tend to, I mean, that's just where my brain naturally goes. And like I look for like when, if a team's running a 6-2 and a setter's coming in and it's 20 to 21, do those five players that are already on the court, do they look like, a little cool, calm, and collected because that setter's coming in? Or, are they feeling really stressed because, for whatever reason? And I think that's one of the things that I've started to gravitate towards a little bit more. And then like I like to try to I think that that's a foolproof theory, but it's not, obviously. And then, when I get the privilege of having those kids come to a camp, I look for the same thing. So it's like my checking process of like, okay, I saw them and how the other people react to them when they enter the court at a tournament. If I have the privilege of them coming to our elite camp or our prospect camp, you know, do I see the same thing? And so is that aura or who you are applicable to different environments?
Yeah, a
Uh,
player that can just come on and sort
yeah,
of,
and
it's like a glue person who kind of comes on and can mesh with anyone
the
instantly.
best part about it is like that process or that vision of looking for these types of players actually works for all the players, right? So like if you're looking for a glue person, it works. If you're looking for a high skill position, like you need somebody who's very technically sound early, you can look for it to see if it works. If you need just, a dog, somebody who's just going to go get it done, right? Like you could see if that person enters the court or is on the court, how do the other two people react? So maybe I'm giving away my recruiting, but like that's what we technically look for or what I specifically look for. And then, I have a staff that looks for other things, right? Like I think Beth does a really, really good job of just looking at the finite technical stuff of like certain things. And like she likes athleticism. And it's like we could teach you your technique when you get to college and you got to have a foundation, but like sometimes like if you're just a good athlete, that helps. And we'll make sure that doesn't go unnoticed.
And I think going back to the first thing you talked about, communication, I think it's for me too, it's the honesty in communication. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, like if you say you're gonna follow up in a week, I would expect a follow-up, even if it's not exactly just
Yeah.
around a week. And I think also because I've had this happen a couple of times where I'll email a recruit, I'll be an email, and they're like, "Hey, I researched your program. I really enjoy what you're doing there, blah, blah." And then I ask them questions about the program, and they don't know the direct answers to it. So I
Yeah.
think one big thing that really helps a recruit just get in touch and start that communication is the honesty in communication.
My one freebie to every listener on the podcast here is make sure the school has the major
Mhm.
before. Don't like we don't have nursing. We have pre-nursing, right? So you'll get a degree in biomedical sciences and then you get an automatic admission to an 18-month nursing program, right? And so like people will be like, I'm a nursing major, and they'll tell me everything about the volleyball program, but they won't look on our website to see could you graduate with a bachelor's of science in nursing? And at our university, you can't. There is no, it's biomedical sciences, and then you go on to an accelerated nursing program. And so that's my one free advice.
And
Save yourself the
I
trouble.
think it's also definitely even beyond that for the school aspect is the financially, because
Yeah.
I feel like so many times recruits just all over. They'll say like, "Hey, I really like the school, I really like the program, all this stuff," but they won't actually research the cost. And then like at the last second, they're like, "Hey, I can't actually afford this.
Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
we're
go
the
to a
we fortunately we're a public school, right? So like even our out of state tuition, $16,000 is still sometimes less than what most private schools can get it down to, like in that 18 to $20,000 mark. We're still less than that. So I don't have that problem.
we had that problem at Sage, especially trying to recruit out of state. We had a lot of international interest too, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, Sage with their international policies is very specific, so we
Yep.
couldn't get those girls. But they were like, "We really want to come here." So it's just kind of things to watch out for when we're initially researching schools. And I try to tell that to recruits. I'm like, "Hey, you have to look beyond the volleyball program. Like the volleyball program obviously is important, but looking beyond it." Um, and kind of still speaking on communication,
Mhm.
like one thing I always say is to recruits is if a coach consistently is talking to you and trying to get you to answer, even like it's not them being like, "Hey, you have to commit tomorrow." It's them saying like, "Hey, we're still interested in you. We still want to continue communication. We want to get to know you better." Obviously, like it can't. I can understand how it could get annoying, especially if you are a recruit being taught by like recruited by many schools. Just getting all those emails can be overwhelming. But it's not anything like there's no pressure. It's unless the email or message directly says, "Hey, we need a commitment announcement if you're coming here by this date."
Yep.
Most of the time, it's just kind of like, "Hey, listen, we still want you. We want you to know we're still interested. We don't want you to think we ghost." Type thing. Um, but kind of speaking of a recruitment, what recruitment does, rebuilding program. You guys had a rebuilding year, and but that's not to say you didn't have some pretty impressive wins. I'd say like Saint Benedict was a really good win.
Yep.
Even Wartburg up there is a pretty impressive win.
Yep.
So like, what was a win this past season that kind of really showed you like what this team was going to be like and the acceleration towards this coming season?
Yeah, I think one was the 5 set win at Pomona Pitzer in California. So like we were I think the theme for us was like just to compete. And I knew we were going to be young and I knew we were going to be a little bit immature. I probably as a third, fourth year head coach probably could have handled our season a little bit better too. I think like there were things where I should have backed off on certain things and just let the process take over and let them and part of that's on me, right? Like I got to wear that responsibility just as much as the players do. And I look at back at our season and I think that like the highlights of some of those moments were like just, competitiveness, right? Like I think the one thing that really probably pissed a lot of players off on our team was the amount of 2 point losses we had in sets. If you go back and look through all of our match books, we had, 2 point loss to Whitewater, 31-29, 27-25 to Oshkosh. We beat Eau Claire in the first set and then lost the next three. We 2 point loss to Stout, 2 point like there was just 2 point losses riddled throughout our entire season. So I think that was probably the one big one that our players wish they could have probably switched at. But like for me, the big like some of the big wins were just it's just that the importance to it was just that feeling of like, hey, you guys can do this, right? Like we we went deep into the bench against the Pomona Pitzer, and that was our opening weekend in California. And normally, like you carry, 18 to 22, you might go about 12 deep into the bench. We went almost 14, 15 deep. Like we were having players go in. We were switching between a 5-1 and a 6-2, depending on what adjustments Pomona made in each set with a lineup. We were putting pressure on different players and that's one thing I think I gotta, and maybe I don't give our team enough credit, so I hope they see this. Um, but like they do a really good job of just stepping up and being adaptable. Like we talk about that a lot. The best ability is adaptability, right? Like we want you to be able to fill roles wherever the team needs you to fill them, just so the team can be successful. And I think, whether the win-loss record really shows that or not, like that is something that they deserve a lot of credit for. And I think the few wins that we do have where, those St. Ben's wins, right? Like another 5 set win. We had 2 5 set losses to Augsburg and St. Kate's, right? Like those were also two big matches where we were 5 sets and it's just lots of adjustment. So I think that's one thing that really stood out to me. Is just like seeing the competitiveness, even whether it's a win or a loss, that is something that like gets me fired up for the next year or the next season or the spring season, whatever it is.
And I think your UWRF is a perfect example of when don't initially look at the win loss because a lot of your losses were to obviously you compete in a very tough conference
Yeah.
to where like more than half the teams are nationally ranked half the time. And
Yep.
then obviously you played CMS and Laverne to open the year.
Yep.
Two losses, took a set from Laverne.
Yep.
That's something to be proud of. But like these aren't like losses where you're losing to like a low rank. These are nationally ranked teams that you're losing to, and you're competing with them. So I think like when a recruit does their research, that's something we always tell them. Like, hey, don't look at the win loss record. Look at the actual game. Look at the statistics. Go back and watch it. See how we played against this top tier team.
Yeah.
And I feel like I said, like I feel like that's especially your school is a perfect example of like you have to look beyond the win loss record, and like you have to see like, hey, like this is how deep we are in our bench in terms of these players can all step on the court and make an impact. Like this is our philosophy. This is how we're growing the program.
Yep.
Um, but I mean, I right now don't have any like more questions in terms of like the coaching side, the recruitment, all that stuff. But I do have one more fun question that I mean, I've been meaning to ask someone for a while, and it's a fun one. You see it on TikTok all the time. You see it, but as a coach, if you could change one rule in
Oh,
the world of NCAA Division III volleyball, what would it be?
oh,
For
uh,
me, it definitely has to do with line judges because I feel like specifically so often it's nothing against them, but there's so many line judges that just know these coaches. And then unfortunately, I'm not gonna like call out people because I mean I feel like all the line judges I've
don't
met,
do that.
all the line judges I've met are very nice people. But like in terms of a judgment call, where in your mind you're like, eh, I feel like I see it going one way, and I think it was on both sides for my team and for the other team. There were some calls we got that I was like, we should. There's no way that should have been our point, but I feel like just having a different way of like officiating. I feel like because I feel
Mhm.
like it's very easy for an official to go on a power trip, unfortunately. Because I mean, obviously at the Division III level, there's no replay. Once a call is made, 99% of the time it stays that way, unless obviously like the down ref's like, oh no, I saw something different than the up ref. But most of the time it's like, hey, you can argue the call for 10, 20 minutes. It's not going to change anything. But like, what's one rule that you'd be like, oh, if I could change that?
Um, oh, this is a good one. I love that the NCAA got rid of the double. And I know that there are some old school coaches that hate that. And the reason I love it is because like if it's a double and it's like, it's atrocious, it's not a hittable ball. And very rarely, if you have 10 double calls, very maybe one of them is still hittable, right? Like the other nine, the other team's just roll shotting and putting in play. So I like the fact that we're not bailing the other team out with, some sort of physical error like that. Like they still have to dig the ball, transition, and earn their point if they want to win the rally. So that was one change that I just already loved. I would love to see net serves. I think that would be one fun one where it's like if it clips the net, it's like a reserve or it doesn't count. But I know some people like they love it. Like I think one year in 2019, I was coaching at lacrosse. We played Barry College. And I kid you not, in like our I think it was a 4 set or a 5 set match. I'm pretty sure Barry College hit the net on their serve at least 10 to 15 times, which is insane. And I remember talking to their coach and they're like, "Yeah, we practice this. We just fire it as hard as we can at the net and we try to clip it." And I'm like, "That's insane." So I like a little bit of the purity of like just get the like, if you watch Wapaka, which is the biggest grass tournament in the United States here in Wisconsin, like if you have a net serve, it's not a point. It's a point for the other team, and then it's a switch and serve, which I think would be really cool. That would probably be one of them. I would potentially be okay with libero's hand setting in front of the 10-foot line. Like I just think it opens up it just makes the game more entertaining. Like when we're seeing even a trickle down into the women's game, but like ultimately a lot of the creativity of offenses have, we're watching middle back run after the setter takes the first ball, jump, pretend they're gonna hit it and then set it out. and it's like, oh, we're watching, Japan do this, and now we're watching it more on the women's side. There was a practice film of like Maddie Skinner doing it when she was at Texas. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, but Irving Nagapeth was like the first one to do it with France.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like he's been doing this since like 2010, like the 2008 Olympics. And so it's like I would love to see just more of that like creativity of just like, hey, what are all the different ways we can unlock the offense? And it just makes playing defense and blocking that much harder, which makes the game more, you're going to see some rallies, you're going to see some crazy kills, you're going to see some creativity. It's just going to be entertaining.
I definitely get the double thing. I feel like I saw so many rallies that would go on for so long and then end on a double, and it's like
Yeah, it's that's
or
the
like
worst feeling in the
or
world.
like matches that would end on doubles. It's like you can't that can't end that way. It's like one of those like how like you when a movie ends, you're like, oh, that movie can't end that way. There's got to be more.
I
But
would be also another good one would be if you're at match point or set point, like you cannot win the game on a miss serve.
mm,
So it forces aggressive serving and you have to go back and just keep firing serves off. Now the downside about that is like tournaments would never do it because like every court would be behind schedule because it's like it's no risk and high reward, right? Like, but I do think like something along the lines of like earning. I think when you earn points, the game is just so much more enjoyable to watch. And so the more you can eliminate like the doubles and sometimes, like the little super petty like on the way down, it doesn't impact the play at all and the shoulder brushes the
oh
net.
yeah, the net. It's just a
It's like,
transition. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, those plays, like, let's just get rid of that. Like, there's no reason to ruin the entertainment factor, the wow factor of the sport of
Or
volleyball.
at least like get rid of it on such a specific scale to where it's like it's very judgmental based on what rep you
Yeah.
have. Like I feel like obviously if they're coming down and like grabbing the net,
Yeah, if the net
okay,
moves more than 1 inch, call it.
yeah, but like if it's like if like a girl's coming down and it's like her pinky barely brushes the net, and the other, I mean, it's like okay,
Yeah.
but I definitely get that, and I do appreciate you coming on the
Yeah,
podcast
appreciate you
today.
having me.
Some wise words today, but have a great rest of your day, and hope to stay in contact.
Yeah, absolutely. And best of luck to you and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job for Division 3. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
thank you. I try my best. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's good stuff. Take care.